Welcome to this session on managing software people and teams. We're going to, in the next 20 minutes, attempt to capture the essence of managing software people and teams. I'm Ron Lichty, and I started my career as a programmer, spent 7 years programming, was pretty good at it, got a few patents, programmed some award-winning software, and moved on to managing after 7 years when I got an offer from Apple Computer to come manage. I spent another 7 years at Apple managing before I left for my first director of engineering role. Did director of engineering roles a few times, became a VP of engineering, worked at very large companies and very small ones, very small startups. Combination of things that made me realize over time that what I had done in every single one of those times when I had been offered the opportunity to manage was untangle the knots in development and product teams. And that led me 8 years ago to pivot my career to consulting, to advising business and engineering leaders on how to make their software development hum and how to make their organizations more effectively agile. As well as taking an occasional interim VP of engineering role. I wrote one of the very few books on managing software people and teams. You probably know that there are hundreds of books on project management, but there are almost none on managing the people who deliver projects. And my co-author and I, Mickey Mantle, and I wrote one of the very few of those. I'm also the co-author of the study of product team performance, in which we asked people on product teams all over the world to characterize their teams, to whether they're high performance or low performance or something in between. And we asked them about practices to see what practices high performance teams do differently from low performance teams and even mediocre teams. Well, the first thing I want to point out to you is, and we observed it just in the fact that our book was something like the 7th book ever in the history of programming on managing software people and teams, that isn't it odd how long we expect programmers to have studied the art of programming and how little we expect managers to have studied the art of managing. I think it's one of the, Mickey and I both found that we became managers having had almost no training in management at that point. We've queried hundreds of managers, perhaps even thousands of managers over the course of the last 8 years, and discovered that no more than half of them have had a single day of training in management. We have this idea that we can just, we've muscled through programming, we can muscle through managing, and it's to the detriment of our teams. It was why we wrote Managing the Unmanageable, because we wanted to share some of the things we learned the hard way and some of the things our teams had put up with in us as we went along. So I want to point out that manager is a multifaceted job, that it includes managing and leading and coaching and mentoring and listening and learning and growing and supporting and enabling. And those are all words that can be summed up in what I think is, it's a set of words that come to us in Agile, being servant leaders, supporting our teams, helping our teams to become great teams. And so I want to talk about great managers, about transitioning to managing, about all of the topics here in the next 16 or 17 minutes. So great managers, I want you to help yourselves identify what it takes to be a great manager by thinking about the best manager you've ever had. What were the skills? What were the behaviors? What was the finesse that manager had? What were the gifts of greatness that made that manager stand out? We've asked people all over the world, we've asked people on product teams all over the world about their best manager, and we always hear words like trust and respect, and we often hear the words like the rest of these on this page. And the thing that characterizes all of these words is that they're all about people skills. While we need people managing engineering teams who are technical and who've had technical backgrounds, that's not what we count on. That's not what we call out as the characteristics that make our managers great. And so we can use that as we think about how we become great managers. So that transition to managing, I'll share with you a rule of thumb that I learned climbing the career ladder, which is that the very thing that makes you successful at one level gets in your way at the next. So if you think about it, that transition from coding to managing, the thing that made me successful as a programmer was the ability to shut out the world, the ability to climb into the microprocessor and listen to its gates open and close, that ability to shut out the distractions and the torrent of noise going on outside of my union with the computer and with the code. And transitioning to managing, I found that that was exactly the wrong thing for managing, because not only did I need to put a welcome mat out in front of my door, but I needed to invite interruptions, because my people's interruptions, my people's concerns, my people's thinking, the things that they knew were things that I needed to know. And so we transitioned from being very introverted to being very extroverted in nature. And we need to think about delegating. So even though we may be great coders, we nonetheless need to delegate the coding to the people who work for us, because our job now is not coding. Our job is leveraging the coding ability of everyone on our teams. Furthermore, I've found that there is a scalar in managing, from throwing people in the deep end and seeing whether they sink or swim, to all the way to micromanaging, actually. And there's a sweet spot in the middle where I want my managing to be, which is delegating. Delegating, not throwing people in the deep end and not micromanaging them. I think there are a couple of rules of thumb around delegating. This one, trust but verify, I think gives us the imperative not to micromanage, the essence of delegation, and it's about setting expected outcomes for teams and confirming that they have met them. It was a Russian proverb, and so I'll give you one from a tech CEO who learned it, Alan Lefkoff told me he learned it from Lou Gerstner, which is, I inspect what I expect. And then I'll give you one specific to us when we're first line managers, which is about one-on-one meetings. Managers who use one-on-one meetings consistently find them one of the most effective and productive uses of their management time. We also need to see that transition from coding to managing as a new learning challenge. Again, not muscling through, but actually learning things. And one of the things I found surprising was I found myself doing something I never imagined I would do, which was reading articles from the Harvard Business Review, one of which was by a guy named Frederick Hertzberg. It was the most reprinted article in the Harvard Business Review ever when one of my colleagues handed it to me. And it talked about dividing motivation into those things that are motivators and those things that are foundational to motivating, those things that can be demotivators, those things that yield satisfaction, and those things that can be dissatisfiers. It led us to take Hertzberg's work and modify it for programmers. I don't have time to spend, I could spend a whole 20 minutes on just this slide and the other charts that we did around when we spend just 3 pages in our book talking about Hertzberg's work and how it applies to us. But notice that the highest blue bar there is making a difference in the world. And fundamentally, we need to communicate making a difference in the world. Why am I working here? What difference am I making in the world for my working here? And make the connection for all of our people between the company's mission and the work that each and every one of them is working on and doing and contributing. That is probably the strongest motivational factor that we can do. I'm going to switch to talking about recruiting because it's probably our most important job. So Mickey and I both have called out this rule of thumb, always be recruiting, as probably the most important rule of thumb in our book, and there are 300 rules of thumb encased in what's been called the creamy center section of our book, even though it's printed on gray. Always be recruiting is, for Mickey and me, our most important rule of thumb out of those 300. And the thing you need to realize is that there's no perfect record. And that leads me to the fact that we also need to be handling problem employees. We need to handle them because everyone on our team knows when there's a problem employee on the team. And I've never yet met a team that wants to handle it. They expect us as managers to handle it, and they expect us as managers to know about it and to deal with it. I had the blessing when I was early in my management career, early as a director of engineering. I was in my third company before I had truly a problem employee, and I had a mentor who taught me something that I've come to call intervention. Intervention is the opportunity to act on and deal with a problem employee long before we would ever be dealing with performance plans, HR's approach to you better do a performance plan before you fire somebody sequence. I learned that from Marty Brownstein, who was my coach in handling my first problem employee. Marty wrote the book, Handling the Difficult Employee, and we talk about that in our book. And so I would recommend that you do either our book or his, because he points out that if you do that process well, that intervention process well, that you will have either of two perfectly good results. One, the problem employee will leave, or that problem employee will turn their behavior around and become a well-functioning employee in our team. And the team will stop having them as a problem in their team. We also have the job of shielding our teams from the torrent of politics around them. We need to be the umbrella, the Maxwell Smart's cone of silence around our teams, or as Joe Kleinschmidt put it, being a damper to the noise. There are all kinds of threats to our team, threats to their focus, and focus is the essence of programming. And we really, the challenge for us is making sure that we're a conduit for the mission and the passion, the strategy for all those communications, even as we are a shield to our teams from the distractions around them. We need to not only manage down, but we need to manage out and up. And I'm going to share with you two rules of thumb about managing up that I think are really state the case. The first from Jim Kouzes, a management consultant, who said the single most important leader in an organization is your immediate supervisor. And the second from Joe Folkman, who points out that you can safely assume that all perceptions are real, at least to those who own them. The thing that is part of that transitionary step from being a programmer to being a manager is that as a programmer, what we write, what we create is tangible, it's measurable. Despite the fact that there are not great metrics for it, it is measurable, and we can we will have obvious evidence of our work. As managers, it is our results are intangible, and probably more in the realm of perception than we've ever lived, and we need to manage the perceptions of our managers. And it's a new role for probably most of us, and it's an important role for most of us to get our managers to understand the contribution that our teams are making and that we're making to our teams in making those contributions. We also have to think about productivity. I have yet to be in a company in which I have not been asked about how do you measure productivity? Is your team productive? How productive is your team? Certainly there are examples like this nugget of wisdom in which people have tried counting lines of code and come up failing, frankly, because counting lines of code is not a measure of productivity, nor is measuring velocity, nor is measuring hours spent or butts in seats, nor is measuring any other form of output. It's because output doesn't count in software development. What counts is outcomes. We want to measure outcomes. We want to measure things like customer delight, about time from request to delivery for the high value stuff, and about quality and about measuring defects released to our customers. Defects our customers find that we didn't. We're also called on to establish culture, to establish a programming culture of trust, psychological safety, and productivity and quality. And Juanita Ma points out that one of the best ways to do that is to publicly reward or acknowledge engineers who act in a way that supports the culture you want to create. A culture of communication is essential, and it's because, and this has become my mantra, rule of thumb over the years, software development is a team sport. Team sports are gated by communication and collaboration. And that means we need to create a culture of communication and collaboration. And that means we almost to a one, most of us need to communicate more. Most of us need to encourage our teams to communicate more. We need to create a culture of communication at every level and with everyone inside of our team and between our teams and all of the stakeholders with whom they collaborate. Now, I want to point out this caveat. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in this ratio. This is a rule of thumb that actually dates from thousands of years ago. But if we honor it, I don't believe that in software development we can over-communicate. I think sales can over-communicate. I think marketing can over-communicate. I do not think in software development we can over-communicate. And we need to create a culture of teamwork and psychological safety. Software development is a team sport. We need to foster teams of leaders in which every single person on our team feels free, feels okay to step up and lead from the experience that they have. Agile calls for self-organizing teams, and that means that even our intern needs to lead from what they're learning in school and share that with the rest of our team. I'm not calling on our intern to be our software architect. I'm not calling on our software architect to be our product manager. But each of those people need to lead from where they are and listen to each other and collaborate with each other in a culture of psychological safety. And fundamentally, respect and trust begin with us as managers. We spend an entire chapter talking about establishing culture. Again, I don't have enough time to talk about that here, only the essence of it. But I will go on to ask the question, with all of that change, with all of that work, for those of you who haven't become managers and are thinking about it, why manage? And for me, I went back, and I'll be honest, I went back and forth between being a programmer and a manager 3 times before I finally realized that I really like managing. I like the contribution I can make as a manager. And I was willing to give up the ecstasy of getting code to work for supporting entire teams of programmers to get that ecstasy. Because you, as a manager, you get to go broad, you get to affect more of the product, you get to affect more of the customer experience, you get to be more in the conversation, and you get to mentor and coach and motivate and support a whole team to become something more and to get that experience of ecstasy of solving hard problems and delighting customers. So this is me and how you get a hold of me. And there's the book and the video training that we've turned it into, and the study of product team performance, from which I urge you to take these lessons and lessons from the other books, and which are now about double that. I think we're up to about 14 books on managing software people and teams now, still a pittance. And here's a little bit more on our book and our video training. Thank you very much for joining me and talking about the essence of managing software people and teams.